What is gender dysphoria? Gender dysphoria is the condition that has recently been brought into popular consciousness. It is often thought to be synonymous with being trans, but this isn't entirely accurate. While gender dysphoria and the desire to physically transition do often co-occur, not all people who experience gender dysphoria transition. But what is gender dysphoria? You might be surprised to learn it is several different things. Loosely, it can be defined as discomfort with one's natal sex and a desire to live as the opposite sex. From this definition, it is understandable that people often equate gender dysphoria and being trans, but we've just skimmed the tip of the iceberg. A bit of content warning here. Because gender dysphoria is experienced as discomfort or disassociation with one's sex, it is important to talk about it in relation to the actual sex and not the goal sex of the person experiencing it. That will be the phrasing for the rest of this video. One more item to note before we continue. The following trends are what have been observed in North America and Western Europe and don't necessarily apply globally. Okay, let's dig in. Until the last 10 to 20 years, gender dysphoria was far more prevalent in males than in females. That has recently reversed, with females outnumbering males by roughly 75%. But we will start at the beginning. Historically, clinicians working with this patient population noticed two distinctly different presentations of gender dysphoria. One group were hyperfeminine boys whose gender nonconformity was clearly apparent to everyone from a young age. They almost always grew up to be sexually attracted to men. About 80% of the time, their gender dysphoria went away before puberty, and they became comfortable living as gay men. For a minority, though, it did persist, and they sought physical transition to present as women. This is known as early onset gender dysphoria and was traditionally observed in girls as well, but not nearly as often as in boys. The second group of males weren't particularly gender nonconforming and were typically attracted to the opposite sex. Their dysphoria didn't develop until at least puberty. Along with these other vital distinctions, this type of dysphoria is often more intense than the former and usually increases rather than relents with age. We call this type of male gender dysphoria late onset gender dysphoria. It has always accounted for the majority of male to female transitioners. Now let's turn to gender dysphoria in females. They were almost exclusively of the early onset variety. They were gender nonconforming, aka tomboys, as children, and just like the boys, most of them outgrew it with puberty. Unlike the boys, the girls usually grew up to be straight. However, those who grew up to be female attracted were more likely to have their gender dysphoria persist. This was the demographic of females who sought gender transition treatment historically. There was one other type of dysphoria clinicians saw in females, but it was much rarer than all previously discussed. These were heterosexual adult females who were attracted to the idea of being gay men and sought transition to achieve that goal. This too was late onset gender dysphoria, as it did not manifest until after puberty. Fast forward to today, or even 10 years ago. Gender dysphoria is now a condition that is most common among adolescent females. It is technically late onset because it begins after puberty. But unlike other forms of late onset gender dysphoria, it is unrelated to sexuality. This dysphoria did not exist until about 10 to 20 years ago and exponentially exploded around 2015. As of 2018, this demographic accounted for roughly 75% of all patients presenting to clinics with gender dysphoria. There's no shortage of theories as to why this is, but digging into them would require more time and a greater appetite for controversy than this short introduction can afford. But if we've piqued your interest in this topic, please head over to our website where you can find more in-depth information as well as personal stories from individuals with a wide variety of experiences with gender dysphoria.